Okay. So here is a question that sounds simple. When did humans first start drinking alcohol? Your first guess might be ancient Greece. Or ancient Rome. Maybe ancient Egypt. Those civilizations had wine. They had beer. They wrote about it. But the real answer is much, much older than any of those. And it starts not with a human decision at all. It starts with fruit. Here is something fascinating about the world your ancient ancestors lived in. Ripe fruit naturally ferments. When fruit falls from a tree and sits on the ground, wild yeast in the air lands on it, eats the sugars inside, and produces alcohol as a byproduct. This has been happening on Earth for about 80 million years. Long before humans existed. Which means that animals were consuming naturally fermented fruit for millions of years before we came along. And many animals actively seek it out. Birds have been observed eating fermented berries and flying in slightly erratic patterns afterward. Elephants in Africa are known to seek out fermented fruit from the marula tree. Even insects are attracted to the smell of alcohol produced by fermentation. The attraction to alcohol in nature is ancient. It is not a human invention. It is a biological response that was already built into the animal kingdom long before we arrived. So when our earliest ancestors started picking up fallen fruit off the forest floor and eating it, they were almost certainly consuming small amounts of naturally fermented alcohol without even knowing it. And their brains noticed. Because alcohol activates the same dopamine reward system that food and safety and social bonding activate. A small amount of alcohol in fermented fruit would have produced a mild feeling of warmth, relaxation, and pleasure. And your brain, which is always looking for things that feel good, filed that away. Now, when did humans first deliberately make alcohol? The oldest confirmed evidence of intentional alcohol production comes from a site called Jiahu in China. Dating back approximately 9,000 years. Archaeologists found chemical residue inside ancient pottery vessels that showed a mixture of fermented rice, honey, and fruit. Someone had deliberately combined these ingredients, allowed them to ferment, and stored the result. 9,000 years ago. In China. Humans were brewing. But here is where it gets even more interesting. Because the question is not just when. It is why. And the answer will probably surprise you. The earliest deliberate alcohol production across almost every ancient culture was not recreational. It was not people trying to have a good time. It was sacred. Ritualistic. Medical. In ancient Mesopotamia, beer was considered a gift from the gods. Workers building the temples and monuments of early civilization were paid partly in beer rations. It was currency. It was nutrition. And it was offered to the gods in religious ceremonies. In ancient Egypt, beer was so fundamental to daily life that it appeared in the hieroglyphic writing system as one of the earliest recorded symbols. Workers who built the pyramids received daily beer rations as part of their wages. Not as a luxury. As a necessity. And here is why that makes complete sense. In a world without clean water, alcohol was safer to drink than water from a river. The fermentation process kills many of the bacteria that would otherwise make you sick. Ancient people did not understand why alcohol was safer. But they observed that people who drank fermented beverages got sick less often than people who drank from open water sources. And that observation, passed down through generations, meant that alcohol became embedded in the daily fabric of ancient life not as an indulgence but as a practical survival strategy. Alcohol kept people alive. And that is why it spread so quickly and so universally across human civilization. But there is one more layer to this story that researchers have found genuinely surprising. Some archaeologists now believe that the desire to produce alcohol may have actually helped drive the invention of agriculture itself. Think about it. To make beer reliably, you need grain. Lots of grain. More grain than you can gather from wild plants. Which means you need to grow it deliberately. Which means farming. The Neolithic Revolution, the shift from hunter-gatherer life to settled agricultural communities, happened around 12,000 years ago. And several archaeological sites from that period show evidence of large-scale grain processing that looks more like brewing than bread baking. The theory, sometimes called the beer before bread hypothesis, suggests that one of the things that motivated early humans to settle down, to plant crops, to build permanent villages, was not just food. It was the desire to make more alcohol. You stopped being a nomad partly because you wanted a reliable supply of beer. Which is, honestly, one of the most human things I have ever heard. So here is the full picture. Humans have been consuming naturally fermented alcohol for as long as we have been eating fruit. Which is millions of years. We started deliberately producing it at least 9,000 years ago. Possibly longer. We used it as medicine, as currency, as nutrition, as a safer alternative to water, and as a sacred offering to the gods. And according to one compelling theory, the desire to produce it reliably may have helped turn us from wandering hunters into farmers who built the foundations of civilization. All of that. From a piece of fruit that fell off a tree and sat in the sun for a few days. Your ancestors were not doing anything crazy. They were just paying attention.